They call them fixer-uppers because you're supposed to be the one doing the fixing. You buy the history, the character, the creaky floorboards, and the drafty windows, believing that with enough sweat and a little bit of spackle, you can make it yours. I bought the house on Blackwood Lane for a steal. It was a skeletal thing, all ribs and hollow spaces, but it was supposed to be my fresh start. The first night was quiet, too quiet. That heavy, oppressive silence that only exists in old houses far from the city. But by the second night, the silence was broken. It started as a faint sound behind the headboard of my bed, a rhythmic, dry scratching. Scritch, scritch, scritch. At first, I sighed, thinking of the cost of a pest control expert. Rats, I figured, or maybe squirrels that had found a way into the crawl space. But as I laid there, holding my breath, I realized the rhythm was wrong. It wasn't the frantic, chaotic scrambling of a rodent. It was deliberate. It was steady. It sounded like a fingernail, long and sharp, dragging slowly across the back of the drywall. I tapped on the wall, hoping to scare it off. The scratching stopped instantly. I waited, my heart thudding in the dark. A second later, there was a tap back, just one, precise, mimicking the exact pressure of my own knuckle. Over the next week, the scratching didn't just continue, it evolved. It moved with me. If I was in the kitchen, the sound was in the pantry walls. If I was in the shower, it was behind the tiles. And it wasn't just scratching anymore. It began to sound like breathing, a wet, labored inhalation that seemed to vibrate the very studs of the house. Then the whispers started. It happened on a Tuesday. I was exhausted, standing in the living room, staring at a patch of damp insulation I'd uncovered. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "I don't think I can do this. I'm so alone here. I'm so alone here." The voice came from directly inside the wall, not 3 inches from my face. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just that someone had spoken. It was the voice. It was mine. The same inflection, the same tired rasp, the same slight tremor of fear. I backed away, tripping over a toolbox. "Who's there?" I yelled. "Who's there?" the wall shouted back. It was a perfect crystalline echo. But it wasn't a natural reflection of sound. There was a delay, a cruel, mocking quality to it. I spent the next hour in a fever dream of terror, testing it. I would think of a private memory, something I'd never said aloud, and whisper a single word related to it. "Sarah," I whispered, the name of the sister I lost years ago. "Sarah," the wall whispered back, but this time the voice sounded closer. It sounded like it was right behind the paper-thin layer of paint, pressing its mouth against the surface, desperate to be heard. It wasn't just mimicking my voice, it was harvesting my thoughts. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The house felt like a throat, and I was being swallowed. The scratching had become a violent tearing, as if something were trying to shred its way through the gypsum. By the third night of the voices, I saw it. A small, jagged hole had appeared in the drywall near the floor, right where the scratching was loudest. I didn't call the police. Who would believe me? "Officer, my wall is talking to me in my own voice." No, I had to see. I had to know what was living in the spaces between. I grabbed a hammer and began to peel away the edges of the hole. I expected to see wooden studs, pink fiberglass insulation, or maybe the dark nest of some animal. Instead, I found nothing. I broke away a large section, and my flashlight beam died in a vast, impossible darkness. There were no studs, no outer wall. Behind the drywall was a cavernous, shimmering space that couldn't exist within the dimensions of the house. As I swung the light around, I saw reflections, thousands of them. The space was lined with jagged shards of glass or ice, each one showing a different version of me. And then I saw the figure. It was crouching in the center of the dark void. It was pale, its skin the color of wet parchment, stretched thin over a frame that was an exact replica of mine. It had no hair, no clothes, and its eyes were nothing but flat silver mirrors. It began to crawl toward the opening. Its movements were jerky, like a film missing frames. Every time it moved, it made that scratching sound, its long, needle-like fingers dragging against the floor of the void. "Stop," I whimpered. "Stop," it said, its jaw unhinging in a way that no human jaw should. It reached a hand out of the hole. It was my hand, down to the scar on the thumb, but it was cold. I could feel the chill radiating off it, a frost that smelled of old insulation and forgotten things. I tried to run, but the thing was fast. It didn't just grab me, it hooked into me. Those needle fingers sank into my shoulder, and I felt a sickening pull. It wasn't just physical strength, it was like a vacuum, a void that needed to be filled. "Please," I screamed, kicking at the wall, at the creature, at the impossible darkness. "Please," it echoed, but its voice was becoming fuller, richer. It was stealing the resonance from my chest, the breath from my lungs. As it pulled me into the hole, we crossed paths. For one agonizing second, we were one. I felt its coldness, its emptiness, its centuries of silence, and it felt my warmth, my memories, my life. It shoved me back into the dark, into the hall of mirrors, and stepped out into my living room. I hit the floor of the void. It was soft, like ash. I scrambled back toward the hole, but the perspective had shifted. The hole looked miles away, a tiny postage stamp of light in a universe of shadow. I watched from the darkness as the thing that looked like me stood up. It brushed the drywall dust off my jeans. It flexed its fingers, a look of profound satisfaction on its face. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a familiar chime. My phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, was ringing. The duplicate walked into the kitchen with a smooth, practiced gait. It picked up the phone. I saw the caller ID reflected in the shards of the void. Mom. It cleared its throat, the sound identical to mine. "Hey, Mom," it said, its voice warm and perfectly human. "Yeah, I'm doing great. The house is coming along perfectly. It's finally starting to feel like home." It looked back at the hole in the wall, directly into my eyes, and smiled. I screamed. I pounded on the back of the drywall until my knuckles bled. But on the other side, it just hummed a tune, a song I used to whistle when I was happy. It smoothed the spackle over the hole, sealing the gap, layer by layer. The light from the kitchen grew smaller and smaller until there was only a sliver left. Now, I'm the one in the dark. I'm the one in the insulation. I can hear him walking out there, living my life, sleeping in my bed, talking to my friends. And sometimes, when the house is very quiet, I find myself reaching out. I find myself dragging my nails against the back of the wall, hoping the new version of me will hear. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Be careful if you hear a sound in your walls tonight. It might not be a pest. It might just be someone waiting for their turn to come back out.